Welcome everybody back to the Eleos podcast. If you are new with us, Eleos is just an ancient word that simply means compassion or mercy for those in need. So it means we stand up for those who are marginalized or mistreated, and we speak up for those who are disregarded and disenfranchised. We try to tangibly show that we are with one another and for one another. And so it's in this essence of Eleos, in light of the recent events with George Floyd and too many others, that we are hosting a series of conversations about race and injustice. And we know these simple dialogues can't possibly signal the end of the unconscionable racism and injustice that's happening in our time, but we do believe they can spark the beginning of something, and ultimately we can all do something. So we hope you'll continue to join us for this series of enlightening conversations that will propel us and energize us towards a life of more Eleos. Our guest today is Brian Michael Cooper. He is the former president of the XFL Houston Roughnecks. He has over 2 decades of experience as a sports attorney and agent. He was 4-time Super Lawyer Texas Rising Star. He was the former director of sports programming at Dish Network, the senior associate athletic director at Rice University. Brian was also the president of the Rio Grande Valley Vipers, which is an NBA G League affiliate. He's a graduate of Cornell University, of Harvard Kennedy School, and Columbia Law School, and now sits on the board for Positive Coaching Alliance in Houston, Texas, where he resides with his wife and daughter. So it's our privilege to welcome Brian Michael Cooper to our podcast today. Brian, welcome.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. We're very excited to pick your brain and hear your perspectives on lots of issues. First thing I'd want to know is, how did you pull the trifecta of 3 Ivy League schools? That's pretty impressive.
I think it just kind of happened. I think, I initially thought I was going to go into government. I was a government major as an undergrad, and then at Cornell, and then I ultimately, wanted to go to the Kennedy School. And then at that point, looked at law as well. And Jackie, my wife, at that point, my girlfriend, was now working in New York. And so I was looking at schools in New York, and so ultimately ended up in Columbia.
Wow. Well, we've had lots of impressive resumes on this podcast, but that might top them all. That's impressive. Way to go.
Thank you.
Hey, so, we run through the same questions with all of our guests, handed them to you prior to this. We've had some time to prepare, and we certainly understand that it's, a sensitive conversation. At the same time, we hope that it's a relaxed conversation, and it's your story, it's your perspective, so you can kind of guide us through what you want to tackle and what you don't want to tackle, but very interested to hear your perspective on what's going on these days. And so the first question we always ask is, when I say racism, you say what?
I say ignorance. If in one word, I mean, it's not understanding. It's and not wanting to understand.
And do you have a first recollection of when people treated you differently because of the way you looked?
Yeah, I would say probably grade school. I think at that point you start having more of self-awareness of who you are. It was about the first time that I had been called the N-word. Wow. I think I was in the 1st or 2nd grade, and I did not, as a 6 or 7 year old wouldn't, doesn't necessarily, you hadn't heard that word. I soon, quickly learned from my parents what that word meant, what that word, the connotation it had, and the impact it had. And so that was probably around that time that I started becoming much more self-aware of who I was and how I was being seen. I had an incident when I was 9 years old. It sticks with me to this day. I went to a sporting goods store with my mother. Larry Bird was there. It was his rookie season, and he's from Indiana. I'm from a town, Evansville, Indiana, Southern Indiana. And we went to the sporting goods store to meet Larry Bird, and he was signing autographs there. And I still have, to this day, the posters, a really crazy poster of him sitting on a bird's nest. There's a Converse poster of him sitting on a bird's nest, and he signed it. But it was a bittersweet day because my mom and I went there, and we got, and as kids will do, I was walking through the store, just touching stuff, right? Just running my hands through things. And as we're leaving, this individual came up to us as we're leaving the store. We were out and got into the parking lot, and he comes up to me and says, I want to, stop. I want to, I think you stole something. I want to see your hands. Take your hands out of your pockets. And my mother, God bless her, was not having any of it. She's like, he didn't take anything. What are you talking about? And it was one of those intense moments where it was just, getting singled out. And to this day, when I go into stores, I will not put my hands in my pockets. I will walk into a store and I will immediately, if I've got my car keys in my hand, they stay in my hand. It's almost like I'm walking through a kind of a portal. As soon as I walk through that door, my hands stay exactly as they were. I do not put my hands in my pockets. And it all comes back to that incident when I was a small kid. And so I think at that time period is when I started really realizing who I was and where and kind of, how I was perceived in the world.
Yeah, we've heard so many stories like that of, young kids being exposed to that kind of bigotry and racism at an early age, and how that shapes, your mindset and your worldview, and still affects you to this day. So I'm curious, with your accomplished resume, all the Ivy League schools you've attended and the presidents of the organizations that you've led, what forms of racism do you still experience today?
Well, look, I'm glad to see people now kind of recognizing the systemic racism and really starting to recognize it. But I think that's really part of it. Always having to kind of, my dad had always said, even when I was young, he said, he said, you gotta be twice as good. He said, it won't be, there's not going to be, you're not going to, if you're anticipating, I think I've kind of, over time, I kind of compartmentalized that. Like if you're anticipating being equal, that's not the case. And I think that, that's kind of the expectation even in the corporate world now that I've still anticipated is that, it's not, that there's things that you're not going to be able to take advantage of because, and look, it's, I've been in the corporate working world for 25 years now, or plus years. And so, but I think those are things that you kind of just recognize and just kind of, I would say adapt and adjust, which is not, quite frankly, the thing you should want to do, but it's the thing you kind of have to do.
So it still drives you and motivates you today?
I think, that's a great question. I think what motivates me today is to continue to kind of advance. I hope at least one of the things that I really enjoy is kind of trying to, when individuals are trying to, particularly in the sports industry, they're trying to get involved in the sports industry. I want to be a sounding board, and I'm generally I want to get on the call and say, hey, look, here's what you need to do, and you try to want to pay it forward, right? It's a kind of a it doesn't tend to be the most open industry, and so making sure that the people are kind of getting an opportunity to look. That's the thing to me that continues to drive and motivates me to set that foundation for a number of people, and hopefully that they can build on it and kind of keep doing it. And I hope I can continue to keep paying it forward for folks on my end. So that's the motivation for me.
Yeah. How big of a problem, and we'll talk more about athletics here in a moment, but because of the organizations you've been a part of and led and the industries that you're in, how big a part, we use this term systemic racism a lot more these days than we have in recent past. And so, I think people probably define that term differently, but in the sports industry specifically, how big of an issue is it?
It's always been an interesting dynamic, right? One of the things that's always struck me in the sports industry is you on an empirical level, you see those that are playing the sport and those that are in management positions in the sport, right? And so, I think that sports has always been a great catalyst for change in respect to, from Jackie Robinson to, Tommy Smith, John Carlos to Muhammad Ali. There's been various timetables and guideposts that have occurred. I think that it'll be interesting now to see how those guideposts continue into management and coaching positions, for example. And again, I think it's a matter of being able to set the tone, to have those foundational things in place so that, people are advancing just like anyone else. And I think that's the thing that still concerns me a little bit about that pace, that level of pace. And I think, it's been great over the last couple of weeks to hear the discussion, and I think there's greater dialogue now. Now the question becomes, is there going to be action behind that dialogue?
Yeah, there has been a dichotomy, and some of my sports background. There is always that difference sometimes between people who are playing and the people who are coaching and the people who are managing and leading those organizations. And hopefully this does spark some progress and change in a positive direction.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, one of the things that's also been interesting lately is I think there's been a disconnect sometimes between the players and even the management and fans, right? That I forget who said it. It might have been LeBron James. He said, he said something like, do you even like me? Or he said something like, and really it was a great point, which was, you like me when I put on my number 23 and I'm in my Lakers jersey and I'm playing and I'm on national TV and I'm winning championships. But if I'm just walking down the street, right, are you going to recognize me, say hi to me, treat me with the same level of respect? And I think that, people are starting to recognize that. The last couple of weeks, I think you're seeing more people having that recognition that, wait a minute, it's a great point, and that's always been kind of a little bit of the troubling thing in sports, right? Which is, you cheer for a person, but are you really going, would you invite that individual over for dinner, right? Yeah. Would you have that person in your house? I always hated it when I hear, and you've heard this too, I would always hate it when I hear people they recognize, oh, we got so-and-so coming on the team. He's such a beast. He's such, almost in like machine-like terms, like we got, this individual, this player to come play for us, and they were able to split the humanity of the individual, the player, from his playing prowess on the field. And you knew that kind of felt like, in doing that question was answered, right? They're going to cheer for you when you're playing, but you might not get an invitation to their home, and you certainly were not being seen as, you were being referenced in almost like the third person, like not as a person, which was a little bit disheartening.
Yeah, I saw Jalen Rhodes on ESPN a few days ago said something to the effect of, "Hey, I'm tired of people appreciating Black culture but not liking Black people."
Exactly. And that's exactly it. It's admiration from afar, but but can you see the humanity of the player? I mean, and look, I've been at sporting events, I've been in sporting events, and been at sporting events where fans will just say whatever, and they will say, and the racial slurs will come out, racial stereotypes will come out, it can get nasty. I remember in the '80s, I think it was Chris Washburn was playing at Duke, and the Duke kids were saying all kinds of hurtful things. I mean, and it was. It sometimes takes, I get the idea of, you're going to get on opposing teams and yell and heckle. But when it gets personal and when it gets to that personal racial level, that's where it becomes, I think, that's where, and I think, again, it's not, recognizing the person behind that, in that jersey, that there is a person with a family, with friends, with, a life, that you just gotta, you gotta recognize and respect that too. Cheer for them, but also recognize their people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Athletics can tear down a lot of barriers, but it can also expose a lot of barriers that exist. I remember in high school, I played for a basketball team. I think maybe there was 2 or 3 white guys on the team. rest of them were black, and we played in Vidor, Texas, which is, if you're from this area, you know what that means. You can, yeah.
Indeed, I do.
And at some point, after that game was over, all the lights went out in the gym, and they had to provide police escorts for us, not only out of the gym, but out of the town. It was a scary moment.
Yeah, no, I grew up in Southern Indiana, and yeah, man, there's you know, there were certain, you know, and you get the, you know, like, you know, and what's, you know, you get the talk, right? My father gave me the talk about, these are the towns, you know, you hear the phrase sundown town, right? And, you know, that these are the towns, you know, when I started driving, you know, he was like, look, you go out with your friends. He goes, these are the towns that you avoid, and you do not be driving, you know, after sundown. And here are these certain towns. Do not, you know, I don't want, you know, do not drive in those areas. And, you know, it is, this is 1987, you know, I mean, this is, you know, 20 years after, you know, the bigger portions of the civil rights movement in the 60s. And yeah, we were having that discussion, and people are still having that discussion now. There's, you know, there's still discussions. I'm sure it will be discussions that will be had where, hey, be careful when you go to this place, you know, and, you know, it's incredible. I mean, it's, and yeah, I remember sporting events as well where, you know, you were concerned, you know, you're in, you know, you literally are a handful of, you know, African-American players literally on a field or on a court, and you're looking around kind of thinking, I probably need to make sure I have an exit strategy, you know, which is unfortunate that a teenager would have to think like that.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. You know, one of the things we want to do here is also kind of paint a picture of success, if we can, to give people some hope in the midst of all this situation. So obviously we've all got lots of negative stories that we can tell about things we grew up with and that we saw. But maybe you could help us understand some positive relationships, some healthy experiences that you've had with people of other races.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, Jason, you're exactly right. Look, we could focus on, you know, and there's a lot of good as well. Like, bottom line is, generally, I think, you know, most individuals are open to conversations and discussions. And certainly growing up, I had friends like that as well. You know, I think you know, I was kind of fortunate enough to, you know, went to a private school, so, you know, I had friends of other races as well as a young kid. And those individuals, I think what was positive for both of us, right, is you get, again, it's being able to put yourself in the shoes of the other person, you know, and that's what, you know, dialogue always has to be the key, you know, being able to sit with somebody and say, hey, see me as a person, and that's reciprocal, right? Recognizing their concerns, and when you do that, you kind of, I always say, you kind of blow past the stereotypes, right? You no longer are stereotyping them. They're no longer stereotyping you. They're seeing you for who you are and as an individual, and that is always great. And I'm fortunate enough to develop a number of those kind of relationships over time. And I think that's always is the continual key, is to kind of be able to say, hey, look, I'm coming into this without any preconceived or prejudice towards you, and vice versa, right? And having that conversation. And I'm hoping we're getting to that stage now. I think, you know, it took a lot of the last 2 or 3 weeks have been intense. I think we have seen a lot of stuff happen, but I think one of the real positive byproducts of this is that people are willing now to sit down and say, okay, I see you, you know, and I want to talk. And I think once that happens, when there's dialogue, there's always good things. So I think over time, for me, I've had some great experiences where I've had just that, where I've met friends who had preconceived notions of me. And, you know, it's great, you know, when you meet somebody and they're thinking, you know, their thought process, well, he's, you know, he does this, this, and this. And then you sit down and you talk with them, and then that's how friendships real good friendships are formed, right? And it's great because you see, you have that understanding of them and vice versa, and really strong friendships where, you know, they'll get your back on issues that, quite frankly, before they had met you, they didn't either understand or might not have as well. And I think over time, I've been really blessed to have some of those great friendships, friends of other races, where I feel like hopefully they've been mutually beneficial to both of us and have helped us grow. I wouldn't trade him for the world. And I think that hopefully we're going to see more of that. I think as time goes on, we just got to continue to have that continued dialogue. That's what, that's got to be the key. Putting yourself in that, I keep coming back to seeing people, and I think a lot of times we look past the person and we don't really sit down and get to know that person. And I want to see more of that.
Yeah, very true. And that was a big impetus behind hosting this series of conversations was, I think once we hear from people and hear their story, see their face, understand their experiences, like you said, real relationships and awareness can happen. And this, is just on a bit of a broader scale. We're having a one-on-one conversation, but other people are listening into it and get to see you for who you are. So if you could have people understand a couple of things about you, if you were in a conversation with them, what would you want them to know?
That's a great question. I mean, I want them to know that I hope at least that I always try to approach things with an open mind. And I think because that's how I want to be, that's how I want them to approach me. So I hope that they feel comfortable that we can have that dialogue and discussion. And I'm there to answer questions, quite frankly, if they don't know. And they ask it, not in what I would say like kind of a snap judgmental way where they already think they have the answer to the question, but they literally ask out of curiosity. I love those conversations. Those are the best ones because they generally want to know what they can do. So that would be one thing about me is an open mind. I think the other thing is, again, not coming in with any preconceived notions of what they expect my response to be. That's always my pet peeve is when I think when someone speaks, I'm sure, I'm assuming it's not just my pet peeve. I think it's a pet peeve of many people when people presume they already have the answer that you're going to give them. And nothing, I almost feel like when that happens, out of just pure spite, I want to say that even if I don't, even if that's not out of the position, I just want to take the opposite position at that point, just to irritate them. No, of course, I know you like so-and-so, like, I probably really do, but I'm like, no, I don't, like, just to see their face. But I think those who genuinely want to have the discussion and get to know a person and will say, we'll not do that. So that's one. I think just, like I said, I love learning new things. I think we never stop growing. We never stop learning. I always feel, it's when I love listening to TED Talks, I think that, and I just think to myself, I get a little bit overwhelmed sometimes when I listen to them because I think, man, there's some really interesting and smart people out there that, I would just love to hear them. You can't hear them all, right? And you're like, wow, these are some really great ideas. And I just love hearing ideas. I love hearing people, I think that's the, one thing I always, I say even just in my work, with my staff or whatnot, I said, there's no bad idea. Please do not feel constrained of not presenting an idea or, a thought process, because that's really, it's how this works, is bouncing things off people and don't make people feel uncomfortable sharing that idea. And so I think that I think that's hopefully that's one good thing about me as well, is I love to hear about things. I really do like to advance and grow, and I want to hear things that are going to move the ball forward. And I'm always quickly frustrated. I think when we don't, it becomes frustrating when it just seems like everybody's kind of entrenched and saying, well, I don't want to learn anymore. Like, you can always learn something. I mean, you can never, I really hope I'm learning up to the day I die. I mean, that I hope I learn something. I would like, quite frankly, to learn something new every day if I can.
That's very powerful. I think dialogue, conversation, relationship is certainly, a big component of moving the issue forward and the solution forward. But I have encountered some hesitancy along the way, and even in the journey of this podcast, people afraid to say the wrong thing, people afraid to ask the wrong question. We had one young man who didn't want to be interviewed for this in fear that, hey man, something might get said the wrong way, and how's that going to reflect on my job? In this social media age, it doesn't take much for the tide to turn the wrong way. So from your perspective, what are a couple of things that people can do to kind of help the situation? I think a lot of people of other races are asking in a sincere way, hey, I'm a little paralyzed by this. I'm not quite sure what to do. So are there a couple of things that you would recommend that everybody could do in their everyday life? And then maybe conversely, are there one or two things that people should stop doing or stop saying that are offensive and they don't even know it?
Well, look, it comes back to, I think it comes to knowledge is power, in my opinion. And I think the first thing folks should do is make sure that they are aware of just learn the issues, work and strive to grow and know more. I think with knowledge comes choice and power and the opportunity to learn from other perspectives. And what people tend to do, I think, on social media sometimes they live for the sound bite, right? Well, I'm just going to say, boom. I said, blah, 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 mic drop, yeah, that was great. You have a good feeling of satisfaction for a couple of seconds. You really came back with a, hard comment, and you're going to feel good about it for a millisecond. And then you're going to realize what just happened there. Yeah, I got a good zinger in. They got a good zinger in on me. And neither of us learned anything from that other than the fact that we, simply got good sound bites in. So I think what I would do is, again, to strive to get as much information as possible, be able to decipher that information, and then and only then can you then take what you learned, analyze it, and say, okay, understand this, don't necessarily understand this, and we'll learn a little bit more, and continue to try to advance. That to me is the best way to do that. You're right that people, things that we're talking about this shouldn't be controversial, right? What we're really doing, right? We are essentially watering this down to the golden rule, right? There's nothing controversial about the golden rule. Treat everybody the same way you learn it in kindergarten, right? I mean, literally, this isn't rocket science, right? This is treat everybody the way you'd want to be treated. You learn that first day of kindergarten, everybody should be treated the same. And so work towards, that type of goal. And I think the more you get those perspectives, try to, I tell folks, read everything, right? Read things that you don't even read, things that take that contrary position to what you want, just so you can go, okay, I see where they're coming from. I don't necessarily agree. I used to love the politicians and the members of government that I most admired on either side of the fence were those who I love to hear would say, you know what, I listened to this individual's argument and I respect it. I respect, there's not a lot of respect going on anymore for mutual respect. Again, that golden rule, right? And that's, I think, it comes from a place, a little bit of ignorance, right? It's, you don't have that with that knowledge, I think, comes with mutual respect to say, okay, I get it. I've evaluated your position. I have mine. I think mine's a little bit better, but you can, let's talk about where you're coming from. And when that person comes from the same place where they say, you know what, okay, I respect your position too. Let's talk about where you're coming from. That's when people start to advance and have that discussion. And, it's not rocket science. It's just treating people, with mutual respect and civility that I think I would like to see more. I think social media from time to time, prides itself again on, when you want to get the likes and the tweets and the retweets is when you drop the bomb, right? Boom, hit it. The harder discussion is having that substantive discussion behind it. And that's what really, I think, needs to still happen a little bit more. And I'm hopeful, I think in the last few weeks, I have been hopeful and heartened by the fact that I think that conversation is starting to happen and people are starting to learn more. They're wanting to learn more. I think that's the other thing. You got to want to learn more. And I think you're seeing people now saying, I got to learn more about this. I need to understand this further. So let me figure out how that happens. And then I can have a meaningful discussion. And so those are the things I'd say, what to do, continue to keep growing and learning. What not to do, don't rely on the quick trigger soundbite that sounds good for a few minutes. And then, and then you come back and realize, what did I just accomplish by doing that?
Yeah, one of our previous guests said something that was pretty profound to me. He said, he thought one of the mistakes being made these days is in part because of the divisiveness of everything. Like you've always got to be on one side of the fence or the other, like, and
Yep.
it's two extremes. There's no middle
Yep.
ground, there's no gray area. And
Yep.
so he said, one of the things he's frustrated by is this assumption that the entire Black community holds the same view on everything. Like there's no
We're a
different
monolith. Yep.
opinion or perspective. Like they all vote the same way. We all believe the
Yep.
same thing. Like, and it's just not true. There's so many differences in the Black community, just like there is in the white community or the Asian
Yep.
community.
Yep.
And one of the things we talked about was, I've got 7 kids in my house. The diversity of opinions just in my own house is off the chart. So
Yep.
making an assumption that an entire group of people all hold the exact same views on every issue and topic is just a little absurd.
Yeah, I think that, and it again, it dumbs it down, right? It gets back to that simplicity that is just not necessary. People want to simplify things in a I would say a non-meaningful way, and it's very frustrating when it happens because they don't want to get behind the substance. It's like it's like the discussion over the players kneeling. Right? It's never been about the gesture. Never. It's been about the discussion, the why behind it. But that's the hard conversation that people don't necessarily want to have, right? It's I can just say, well, kneels, it's disrespectful to the flag or it's not disrespectful to the flag. But why? What was the reason for it? And finally, in the last few weeks, people have said, I want to learn more. I need to understand, And in doing that, they're jumping past the why. They're jumping past to the why. And to your point, they're moving forward to making sure that they're not just compartmentalizing people in one area. They say, look, I need to understand, and I want to have that conversation and dialogue. And when you put people in those compartments, it's just, one, it's highly frustrating and it's not productive. It's unproductive to do that. And I think that's hopefully that is going by the wayside soon as well, where people will say, I'm not going to compartmentalize you. I need to understand where you're coming from, and I want you to understand where I'm coming from, and let's sit down and have a discussion.
Yeah, you mentioned the kneeling in the NFL, started by Colin Kaepernick and some others. I'm interested from your perspective on what role sports can have in healing us going forward. I see the running back at Oklahoma State that held his coach accountable, where I played at Oklahoma State for a while. You see other instances like the University of Texas, hey, we don't want to use this song anymore. We don't like the way these buildings are named or these statues are erected. So it seems like there's a greater, not just awareness, but a boldness and a courageousness to speak out against things that are unjust. So from your perspective and your unique roles that you've had, how does sports help carry us forward in these moments?
I think, sports can be an incredible unifier, right? Sports advances the conversation. Historically, it's advanced the conversation. Like I said, Jackie Robinson and John Carlos and Tommy Smith. They're a great case in point of an initial act that was, that over time people began to understand why they did it. When they did it in 1968, they were sent home immediately, right, from the Olympics. They were banned from running in track and field for years until finally, I think people were like, again, they asked the why. And they said, why were these 2 young men so motivated to do what they did at the Olympics? And when they started to do that, they started to recognize that, wait a minute, okay, this was the culmination of a very tough year, right? 1968, Dr. King had been assassinated, Bobby Kennedy had been assassinated. You had, probably one of the most tumultuous years in American history. You had, incredible things going on over home and abroad. And as people started to recognize the context and the rationale and the reasons, they started to understand, and the dialogue opened up. And I think sports provides that ultimate jolt in that discussion. It can be a great platform and catalyst for change. And it also can be a great unifier, right? the great things about having, I felt like with our team and our fans that they were, I wanted them to be a family, right? I wanted them to come in and get to recognize and get to know people and get behind, the team and get to know one another and support one another at the games too. You want people to come in and be inclusive and feel comfortable. And I think once you have that comfort level and inclusiveness, that comes with additional dialogue, getting people to kind of see that. And sports does that for a lot of, has a great, it is a great conduit for that kind of activity. And so I've always thought that sports was can be integral to change and conversation. And then you're seeing, again, like you said, you're seeing it now with many of the players that they're standing up and saying, wait a minute, see me as a person and see what I'm going through, fan. I know you're my fan on the field, but I need you to be a fan of me off the field too. And the fans, to their credit, are saying, you know what? You're right. You're right. I need to see you. And I just hope that continues. And I hope that they continue with that voice and that sports allows for that voice. I think it's just going to make things, I'm hopeful, my fingers are crossed, that that's going to, in the sports world, it's going to make things, even better, right? When fans have had these kind of these tough, raw conversations, get to that level of understanding, I think it's going to make for a better, once we're, the fans are back in the stadiums and able, I think it's going to make for a better product, better atmosphere at the games.
Yeah, I think we're both in agreement. The power that sports can play in these kinds of issues, and we just saw the Confederate flag being removed from all NASCAR events, which was a huge.
It was amazing, that and how quickly it happened.
Yeah, things are happening at a quick pace. A question that may be off script here a little bit. Obviously we're here in the midst of the coronavirus and that pandemic that kind of preceded all of the George Floyd events and the uproar over the racism, which has created this very unique mix of things happening in our country. What's your outlook? How optimistic are you, viewing that sports can be something that galvanize and bring us together? What is the future of sports in the next 6, 12, 18 months from your perspective?
I don't know. I mean, there's definitely, it's a great question. I think with respect to how quickly do we have spectators back in stadiums, I don't know. I mean, I think that arguably people aren't going to feel completely comfortable to go back to the stadium until there's a vaccine. But I do think fans want to get back to the stadiums. There's a desire to have it happen. I think that there will probably be some stair-step process of integrating fans into the game. Maybe it's 5,000 for the first game, and then we see how that works, and then it goes to 20 and so forth. But you'll probably see just stair steps of getting fans back in there and kind of measuring it. But I think it'll happen. I think people are committed to one of if there's a silver lining in what's been happening, obviously, and again, if, with a capital I, if, it's that people are now going back in their procedures and seeing how sanitation procedures, all the things to make sure fans are protected, quite frankly, that we weren't thinking about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. They're now all come to the forefront. So you're going to see a lot more of that. So I see that, in probably the next immediate future, fans will come back in. It won't, I don't foresee stadiums at 100% capacity. I don't think that would, that's going to happen. But I think you're going to be able to see fans come back in at a limited capacity. And then there would have to be close monitoring and making sure that, everybody's got to be monitored after that. I want to see sports come back. I mean, I think that, it's been tough, not only, I'm a fan, I love seeing live sports, and, we get little snippets over the last few months, right? The Last Dance, the Tiger versus, Tiger versus Phil and Brady and Manning. That was great. I mean, we are starving for seeing, we want to see our teams and things back on the field. So I'm hopeful, but I think it's probably going to. I think that it's going to be a very careful rolled out process to get fans back in the building.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. When the virus first broke out, having been around and in sports my whole life, I work for a sports organization now. It was an interesting moment for a little while. Like, well, maybe sports is not as important as I thought it was. Like I didn't miss prior to it, we'd been to the XFL game, we'd been to the Rockets game, we'd been to the road. I mean, we'd seen everything we could see over spring break.
Yeah.
And there was a little pause there. It was like, maybe this is not as important as I made it out to be. But then you transition into the recent events and the divisiveness in our country, and you start thinking, maybe it's more important than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And it does give us an arena and a common ground to share and hold conversations around and build relationships. And so now I'm in this season where I'm missing it. I want to see it. I want to be there. I want my kids to be playing. I want to be coaching my kids. I just miss all of that interaction. And I think what's happening in our country is just highlighting, the necessity and the importance of sports in our culture for sure.
No, absolutely. I agree. I think that it is, it was interesting to see whether or not, a game can, help, bring folks together, but also to help diffuse tense situations, as well, and that's, I say it again, sports is a powerful medium. I think that for those who, kind of, I don't say disrespect sports, but think, well, it's a diversion. It's granted, it's, it may not necessarily be, I'm reluctant to not, I'm reluctant to place, obviously, you don't want to put undue weight on it, but at the same time, I just don't want to give it short shrift. I think you're right that there's times where it is great to have people get around to come together for one common purpose. And so I miss it too. And I like I said, I think it's going to come back bigger and better than ever. I think that the raw and hard conversations we've been having a few past weeks, when people do come back together, I think that they're coming back hopefully with a little bit more of a different view and different eyesight. I think that's been very, just seeing all the messaging, all the sponsors, teams have all done these, all now come out and said things that I would not have anticipated 6 months ago. And all of a sudden you're seeing that, okay, people are understanding. And I think when sports comes back, it's going to be great.
Yeah. I hope you're right. We've got a little bit of a challenge going on in this podcast, and we're not trying to put people on the spot, but are there other voices, people that you run with that you think would be helpful on a medium and a platform like this?
I think there are. I'm trying to think about I'll put folks on the spot on this one. I certainly think that there are some other individuals I think who would enjoy discussions on this. I probably wouldn't want to put them on the spot here because now all of a sudden I've committed them to it, and they look at me and go, "What did you say?"
We've had some people.
But I think this is a great. I do think.
Fair enough. We can connect offline and do that.
Yeah, I think this is a great medium for it, and I think there's some folks who I think would be, very interested in having that discussion and bring it from different perspectives. Quite frankly, a couple of folks who are a bit younger than me, I think look at it a little bit differently, which is great. I mean, I think that's I love the fact that there's because what's been kind of frustrating to me is that these conversations, the kind of ones we've been having recently. I mean, you could my dad had the same conversation when he was a teen. I had it. You see young people now having that same combo, and I'm like, at some point, hopefully we will, my daughter and her generation will not be having this conversation with their kids. I hope, but it's always good to get greater perspective.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you being on, and we always want to close each podcast with kind of an uninterrupted 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Acknowledging, again, what happened to George Floyd in just an unconscionable manner and way that he was murdered. And you certainly don't have to take all that time, but just as a symbolic thing, want to give people the opportunity to use that same amount of time to hopefully bring hope and bring life and bring positivity. So if there's anything you'd like to say in closing, we'd love to give you the floor to do that.
No, I appreciate it. I mean, look, what happened, I can't believe it's now been 3 weeks. And, I come back to the question of seeing the humanity. Certainly there was a lack thereof in the death of Mr. Floyd, right? And that's the most heartbreaking, I think, thing for me was that the lack of humanity. And what I'm hoping for and striving for is for, going forward and to build, things that are going to be constructive. We have to start first with the simple golden rule that we all learned again as 4 and 5-year-olds, which was, do unto others as you would want done to you. And that means seeing that humanity, seeing that we're, I remember the famous civil rights poster board in the 60s, I am a man, right? And you're seeing, you're seeing that now, and it's being replicated now, today. And it's true, you are, see the humanity in others, recognize where they are, where they're coming from, and what they're doing, and use that vision of that humanity to establish a dialogue and a conversation, and come at it in a place of true equality, recognizing that we are all both, we're all humans, and that we want to have those same rights, the same concerns, those same protections are wanted by all. And with that, have that discussion on that almost on that equal plane. I want to see that happen. I think that's how we will have not only constructive dialogue, but then constructive action going forward with people. And so I think that's what I want to see. I think we can get there. I am always going to be hopeful that we can get there. I'm hopeful because as a parent, as parents, we always strive to want our generation to exceed, what we've done. And they're going to do that by having that mix of humanity, that mix of having that conversation on an equal plane, and then building that foundation for constructive action. So the hope is from tragedy, from a act of absolute inhumanity, we start to see in each other as individuals, and we start to work together, recognize who we are, and then have that collective action and move forward to the great things that I think we can all have. And so that's my hope, and I think we're going to get there.
Well, I can see why you're a good lawyer. You're very articulate. You're very good with words, and I'm hopeful that just you agreeing to have this conversation today and allowing people to see you and hear you will help bring awareness, help bring change ultimately. And so I just want to really, again, say thank you for joining us today and touching on some of these sensitive issues. And certainly want to thank everybody else for joining us as we continue this series of conversations.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.